Welcome to the after party. Welcome to the after party. Did you bring some snacks and treats?
Yes, it did.
I hope you got me something to eat.
Maybe.
Welcome to the after party. Coming to the after party.
Right now.
I've been waiting here all day to act like a fool this way. Welcome to the after party. Join us in the after party.
Right now.
Oh, chocolate and gabbing, maybe some microphone gabbing at the after party.
With DJ Eric Page.
With DJ Eric. Pagey has not returned. Pagey has not returned. He's taking the week off from the after party. He will be back though. So it is me. Hope everybody's having a good week. We do have a special guest today, and it is someone who has not been on the after party in I don't even know how long it's been. Wow, it's been a minute. Anyway, but he's got a very fun stream that he does on his own every single week. And he's a fan favorite. I think you guys are going to be very happy to see him. He's been requested to come back on the stream a lot. It's so funny. People are guessing all kinds of names. He's wanted to come back on the stream a lot. And I've actually been asking him, and it's just not linked up because it's like so much stuff, such a busy person. But anyway, so he's back on the stream. He's going to be here this week, and he's going to be here next week. We have an extra large stream next Saturday. We'll talk about that as well. But yeah, here he is. Welcome. Lance is in the house. Lance is here today.
Somebody said Eric Wallace.
Yeah. So, well, let's take you down. We need Eric Wallace. Hold on, here we go. So, Eric Wallace is in that. No, it's Lance. No, we have Lance in the house. He hasn't been here in a minute, so it's good to have him back. How are you doing, Lance? What's going on? You've been very busy.
I am
that
good.
That train is very busy too. I hear
it's that time. It's that time of day. But yeah, it's just been busy gigging and whatnot. So at least we got this to line up somehow. We got it to line up somehow.
Yeah, we started a little bit earlier today because Lance does have a prior engagement tonight, so we want to make sure we're done in time for that. But next week we're going to be joined by Lance, and I already have at least one, maybe two special guests next week where we're going to be talking about the future of DC TV, where it's going to be post Arrowverse. And what kind of content we're going to have. So that's the special stream next Saturday, considering we only have one show to talk about next week, which is Titans. But you know, that's the way it is. But I'm glad to have Lance here today. We actually have 3 shows to talk about. And at the end of this, we're going to talk about The Flash because Lance and I have not had a chance to discuss it. But I think a lot of our criticisms of The Flash this season are going to line up. So we will definitely talk about that at the end of the stream. So it's going to be a fun stream. I'm really excited to have Lance here. And, you know, Pagey will return. He might even show up in the chat, you guys. If you want to summon him, you can. He might show up in the chat. We'll see where it goes. All right. So we're going to start out with just a couple small things, a little bit of housekeeping here. We had Titans return this week with a 2-episode premiere. Were you looking forward to the return of Titans? Is this a show that you were a fan of in the first half of the season 4?
Yes, I actually was. Of course, that mid-season finale left a lot to be desired. But I was happy that the show was back, especially since this is like the last premiere per se that we're gonna have for it. I was excited to see it back, and it did not disappoint.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually didn't have too much of a problem with Titans in the beginning of the season. I did not like the mid-season finale. I thought it was the weakest episode of the first half. So coming back into this, I was really excited to see where that goes. So we'll be talking about that in just a moment. We got 2 episodes to talk about, but it's almost like one long episode. So it's not a lot, which I can see why they shifted episode 7 to episode 9, because I think it would have been weird to have 7 and then 8 be the first half of these 2 episodes. And then that 9th episode be the cliffhanger. So I'm glad they did that shift. We're also going to be talking about Gotham Knights, which by the way was a big Harvey Dent episode this week. And I love Misha, definitely the VIP. But we're going to start out in order. So we're going to start out with Superman and Lois first. And this week's episode was titled Head On, I believe, was the title of the episode. Yeah, here we go. Head On was the title of the episode. And this episode had a very interesting storyline in it.
Those photos are very misleading.
They're very misleading. So I did this. We talked about this. If you guys didn't know, on Mondays, I do a rant and preview where I go through and talk about the synopsis and the photos and the trailers, sometimes of the episodes. And this week it was a little bit weird because there were so many photos of this like sweetheart dance that they were showing. And it really wasn't, I mean, it was a part of the episode, but it wasn't like the main focus of the episode. I enjoyed this week's Superman and Lois. I think, to me, the show, I almost think it's too mature in ways. Like it's the best show, obviously, on the CW, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's a lot of times there's people have said, and I'm not going to disagree with this, that this season is very heavy, that there's not a lot of levity in the season, that it's a very serious season. And when you leave the episode, you're not feeling like you've taken a journey, if that makes any sense. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it's like this whole cancer storyline with Lois, it feels like by the time we're at the end of the episode, you're not feeling good each week. Would you agree or disagree with that? Do you think that's a problem for you in the episodes?
I can see why some people would say that. I actually had this discussion over on Facebook in some of those groups. I can see why some people say that, but at the same time, this show started off with Clark's mom dying. So at the same time, we know what to expect. Especially at the end of this episode, I jumped off my couch with glee because even though like each episode it's really heavy with the cancer stuff, they still hit you with something that makes you want to keep coming back for more. And for me personally, it gets me excited for the following week.
Yeah, I think that this episode in particular, the ending is very exciting. We're going to talk about that. The ending is very, very exciting. But each character, we had some interesting stuff. Obviously, we had the stuff with Kyle and Lana and Sarah and Chrissy, which all kind of dealt with that relationship, family relationship. You know, the relationships between Kyle and Lana and then Chrissy, him being publicly, dancing with Chrissy out in public, which, by the way, I have to say, I have to give a shout out to the makeup department with Chrissy because they really took her in a different direction. Like the hair, the makeup, everything this week looked really good because they usually make her look like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like she's always at work. She looks like she's always at work, right? So you never really get to see her outside of that. And I think that this episode, we finally got to see another side of her that we really hadn't seen, even with her times with Kyle in the bed with the phone ringing. We didn't really get to see that. So I enjoyed that. This whole separate family thing isn't my favorite part. And then they dealt with Junior, the son of the mayor. And ultimately, this was a storyline for rebuilding between Sarah and Lana because she was feeling bad for Junior. She was drinking in the parking lot. Her mom caught her doing that. That was a problem. But ultimately, Lana could have gone the direction of getting Chrissy to smear the mayor's name and release all of this stuff that shows just what kind of person he was behind the scenes. But she changes her mind because she realizes that that's a personal thing. And for the betterment of the community, she needs to not make it personal. And so she decides to name the new town hall after the mayor. Do you think this was a good decision? Do you think this is the right path for her character to kind of let go of all that baggage and really push forward with this like unifying of the community?
Yes, honestly, if she would have went down the route of the whole smear campaign, that would have tainted my view on the character of Lana, especially in this universe, because the one from Smallville was already tainted for me anyway. But this one in particular, since I'm still trying to get back used to the character after, last season, because I didn't like every single character decision that they made with her. I loved this. It showed growth. It showed maturity. And it showed that, like, she's the mayor. She cannot stoop to the same level that the former mayor did. No matter what the people are saying about her, which is kind of dumb that people are saying that like she cheated and she's the cause of his like she didn't let none of that get to her. Yes, you can see it affected her, but she didn't let none of that get to her. If she would have stooped to that level, oh, I would have nothing else good to say about her. That's all I'll say.
I want to give a shout out to Thomas Scott for becoming a Team Eric member again. I'm glad to have you back. I appreciate it, showing the support. Thank you so much. If you guys would like to become a Team Eric member and support the channel, you can do so by hitting the join button and selecting a tier. I do appreciate it. It gives you custom badges and emojis and all that stuff. So thank you so much for that, Thomas. Do appreciate it. I agree. So I think that Lana, I mean, I know I complain about how the story's going, but Lana's had a really good series of growth over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah,
as a character. And I think it goes a little underappreciated because we do feel like the story is not as important as the stuff from our main characters. And I think that's sort of something that we've been taught from all of the years of normal CW television, where the supporting characters aren't the ones you're supposed to be focused on. And on Superman and Lois, they seem to care as much about the supporting characters as they do the main characters. Because one of my complaints about The Flash, and we'll talk about this in just a bit, is that the supporting characters, at least in the recent years, don't really matter. And it just seems like it's a problem. Whereas over here, they're giving them something. So I can't be too salty that the supporting characters are actually getting content, because I think it is important if they want to do that. We also had some stuff with Natalie and the General, which I thought was quite nice to follow up on that.
I love that.
So, you know, as someone who has a lot of kids, you got a whole ass family over there. So somebody with a lot of kids, how does it feel for you to see, because you have to remember, and I think people forget this, Natalie is not only displaced from her Earth, but she lost everyone. Like she sees people that look like her family, that they're not her family. So as someone who is big on family, how important is it to you to watch this relationship building between her and her grandfather in this moment? Because I feel like it is an important thing that is overlooked, and it does give General Lane something interesting other than like yelling at Clark, which he does quite often. So I love Natalie. What do you think of this storyline? So
I loved, like Nora just said, I loved her calling him grandpa, especially in that was a really, really tender moment that in most other shows you wouldn't really see something like that coming from a displaced character to a person that kind of looks like that looks like their grandfather, or you know, something like that. That was a Barry and a Joe moment, if I could say it like that. I love that. I love the fact that she's getting more and more comfortable with him, especially after what he did, how he had that very tone deaf moment in some of the earlier episodes. I thought that this was a really, really, really good way to redeem him, show that he's working to be a better person, to sympathize with her more. You know, that still, at the end of the day, she's on this earth. This is where she lives now. She's going to look to you as a grandfather, as a father figure, as a friend. I love that they're, developing that more. And I really hope we see more and more of that, because he seems to really, really care for her. And she seems to really, really care for this new family. And it's way more growth from her last season, as to where she just, at first didn't want anything to do with them.
Right.
And I loved it. This is good writing, good character development on both ends.
Now, do you trust Mateo?
Of course not. And I think Sam Lane, when he said that, Sam Lane was right. He was.
You see him peeking. He was peeking out the window. So I have to say, one of the funniest things to me, it wasn't supposed to be funny, but it was funny to me, is when they were out there talking and he's looking like out the curtain like this, and I'm like, that just being completely obvious that he doesn't trust Mateo. And also, it's kind of weird. The kids are just like, well, he's a cool guy or whatever. It's like they're not even thinking about like the security risk of this character. But the General is not playing. He's like, peeking out the window and keeping tabs on Mateo. I don't think he has any good intentions. I feel like there's something else going on. I could be absolutely wrong. One thing I love about Superman and Lois is typically you think you have it figured out, and then they do something to like switch it up on you. It's like remix, and then it's all completely different. I still don't trust Mateo. A lot of people theorize that he could be related to Bruno. Do you think that's a possibility that he's related to Bruno? Or
now, I know when they first announced his casting or whatever, it was also put out there that he was the son of Darlene Irons, making him Nat's cousin, which is weird. But then I started thinking, more and more as people started theorizing that he could be Bruno's. What if he's Bruno's son, but it's Darlene and Bruno, and the whole thing from the last episode, of her being in danger was just just her playing along.
I will agree. I think that I've been very skeptical about that whole situation. I think Bruno knew exactly what he thought, what he believed that John Henry would do. Like, I think he had an idea that was what was going to happen, because I believe he could have stopped that detonation at any point. We don't even know if it would have actually happened.
Exactly.
Because the thing was, he didn't like get her out. He stopped it. So we don't even know if it would have actually exploded. We have no idea. So I still feel like there's something sketchy going on with that relationship, and I don't know what it is, but I honestly cannot wait to get to the bottom of that. Josh Darby with a $5 super sticker. How's it going? Thank you so much, Josh. How are you doing? I'm having a very good afternoon. So thank you so much for that super sticker. I do appreciate it. All right, so let's move over to the stuff with Lois and Clark. So she's decided to go to Hobbs Bay Medical Center, which used to be South Metropolis, which they don't call it that anymore because apparently that was the name it had when it was considered to be like an unnice,
the suicide slum.
Yeah, basically the bad part of Metropolis.
I love that though. I love how they're calling it suicide slums, because in a perfect world, if Black Lightning was still on, they could have put it there. Yeah, because that's where he's from.
Right.
In a perfect world.
But they had to change it up.
Stupid mergers.
But the fact is, also, I want to point out, and this is not related to that, they're spending a lot of time in Metropolis this season. This feels to me like if we do get a season 4, and we'll talk about that in a moment, I believe that they are going to move the show into Metropolis. It just makes the most sense at this point.
It feels good in Metropolis. I like the show being in Metropolis.
I do too, but there's also some other things that happened. We'll get to that, but there's a couple things that happened in this episode where it feels like they're putting closure on Smallville, and they're getting ready to move in Metropolis. Okay, so we have that going on, and we have Clark in his I can't do anything era. He's very like, he cannot fix this problem. And this is something that I think a lot of people, we always complain about superheroes having their powers taken away, right? We say Barry has his powers taken away, someone else has their powers taken away. And that seems like it's a very, I don't know, lazy way to sort of create tension. But in this one, Superman is still as powerful as he's always been, but he can't do anything. And I think that's quite interesting. And then he has a chance to talk to some of the ladies there who are also dealing with their cancer diagnosis. Some of them are relapsing. Some of them have been through it before. And they're talking to him and having this moment. Now, the people, because I watch with a group of friends, some of the friends that I was with said it felt like a Hallmark Lifetime thing that was unnecessary, because they're like, we could have done that in 5 seconds. And I agree, we probably could have. But I think what they were trying to do in that moment was create an excuse for why Clark wasn't just able to go and help Lois. He had to run interference for her, basically. So he was there doing that. And they also wanted to, I think I might be, and I want to know your take on this. Do you think they're overcompensating for the severity of this storyline by doing stuff like this? Do you think this is their effort to try and make sure they do everything they can to let people know they're taking this very seriously? Do you think that's what's happening? Or do you think just in this episode, it was a distraction for Clark? What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both, because I will not lie, during that whole conversation between him and the two ladies, one of which I think is onomatopoeia because of set photos. It did run a little bit long, because I'm like, okay, Clark, I know you can hear what's going on with Lois. Like, I felt that in some of those moments that they could have had the little noise playing, letting them know that he's listening or whatever. Like that he's listening to everything like that's going on between her and Bruno. I felt as if it did drag on for a bit, but not too long as to where it would put you to sleep. Right.
I'll agree with that. I think that's very very good assessment there. What did you think about Lois's? So Lois is going to be Lois. And I think that's something we just have to accept. She doesn't like to be told that she can't do something, whether it be like verbally saying you can't do it, or whether it's just them saying or her feeling like she's incapable of doing something. So she's going through her second round of chemo, and they're telling her it's going to start to hit her, and she's going to really need to like save her energy for getting through this process. But she's like, nope, I'm going to walk around. I'm going to go and I'm going to, go into the office and figure all this out with Bruno Mannheim because she's so dedicated in figuring that out. I think we all know people in our lives that are like this. Lois is not an anomaly. I know people that when they get sick, they literally have to be in the bathroom with the door locked to not function. You know what I mean? Like they'll complain about it, but they're still walking around doing everything. Do you think this is an admirable quality? Do you think this is something that people should strive for? Or do you think this is just who Lois is as a character and they're doing a good job of showing that? This is my favorite iteration of Lois, by the way. I've confirmed that Elizabeth is portraying my favorite version of Lois in all of live action.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think this is a quality that people appreciate, or do you think it's something where people like, oh no, not again. Here she goes. She's going out. Lois is being Lois. Where do you fall on that? On that spectrum?
I'm somewhere in the middle. I like in this instance, I felt as if like she's playing a very, very dangerous game. Like you said, we all know somebody that that is like this, that just won't sit down.
Mm-hmm.
So I admire it to a certain point. I felt as if this was a really, really, really reckless, especially because this place has cameras. 2, it's ran by Bruno Mannheim.
Mm-hmm.
3, you're walking around with an IV, so you can't literally sneak like you want to sneak. And when she was in the office, I'm thinking, you're moving really, really slow, Lois. Something should tell you, let me wait. Or, I don't know, let my husband come back and maybe do some super speed stuff through here, see what he can find.
Okay. So that's the thing. I wanted to get to that. Superman could have done this without being seen.
Exactly.
100%.
He just sat down and said, okay.
But he didn't do that, which is part of why the people believe that Hallmark moment was basically to give him something to do so that he couldn't do this. So that doesn't make any sense to me either. But Lois is the investigator. She's the one that does all this. It is her story. So it doesn't make sense that that's what's happening. But it was like, you're being treated for cancer and your husband can move at super speed. So like, I don't really know. Anyway, the whole story was that she's a patient so she can get through the hospital safer, but she's in an office with tons of windows. It's like it's like a completely open office. But then of course Bruno catches her, which by the way, when that moment happened, I was like, it's like when your parents walk in on you when you're doing something wrong. And I'm like, oh.
And then they cut to commercial after that. I'm like, oh, here we go.
But then what Bruno does is he actually sort of does what I think a good antagonist can do, which is explain to you why he's doing what he's doing.
I
what
call
his
his Lex Luthor moment. That's his Lex Luthor moment. That's something Lex would do.
He tries to pull us in a little bit and say, look, I lost my mother. This is what my life was like. This is why I'm trying to do all this. It's my research facility. So it's like, look at all of this good stuff I'm doing so you don't see all the other stuff that's happening, all the other stuff that's going on. And it was brilliant. By the way, I feel like Chad did not get his time on Arrow because over here on Superman and Lois, he is killing it.
Yep.
As Bruno Mannheim. He wasn't bad on Arrow. Don't get me wrong. But even though he got a lot of screen time, we never really knew much about that character. But over here, we already know a lot about Bruno, and he's only had a few scenes here and there on Superman and Lois.
Wasn't he on the Prometheus season?
I believe so, yeah.
That's why. Why would you cast Chad Coleman in that amazing of a season with a villain like that? Like, no, you wasn't giving him
he's got a delivery about him where you're listening to everything that he says.
Everything.
Like when he is on screen and he's talking to you, you are paying attention. And it's really good. So I'm really enjoying him as this, like, I don't want to say, I mean, he is a villain, but also we understand why he's doing it. So we have to wait and see ultimately like what's going to happen with that. But while he's talking to Lois and explaining everything to Lois, we see Cheesy Clark show up at the door there, waving in, being Clark Kent, which by the way, just the whole idea that let's be honest. If he needed to save her, he could have saved her easily at that. Like there was nothing stopping him from doing that at that point, but he didn't want to blow his cover. He didn't want things to be, he's just waving at her or whatever. and then that scene ends and we carry over to the dance stuff where everything sort of comes together. But we do have some stuff with Deadline. We want to talk about a character that was introduced, but Cody has a $10 super chat and a Team Eric member. He goes, both stories this season are hitting really hard for me as someone who had a grandmother who got breast cancer and my bigger sister is currently going through divorce. So you're getting all of it on Superman and Lois. You're dealing with the Kyle and Lana stuff, and you're dealing with the cancer stuff. So yeah, this is why this was a very risky story to tell on a very serious season. There's not a lot of levity on it. And when would you even find time to make humor a focal point on a season that's so serious? So I think it is really tough. Because I think most people, not everyone, I mean, Paige, he talked about this when he was on stream a couple weeks ago. He doesn't have a reference for people with cancer. He doesn't really know anybody, but the majority of people do know someone that has had cancer. It is something that has touched everybody in a different way. Some people have actually gone through it themselves. Some people have lost family members to cancer. Some people have seen family members beat cancer. So it is one of those things where you never know how someone is being impacted by this. And this is why I actually think that the show is criticized as being for pulling the storyline in. I have to give them credit because they've done a really good job with it. So thank you so much for that, Cody. I do appreciate it. So let's talk about the fight scene we got. So we have this character that was introduced through Bruno, who was mentioned, I think, at the beginning of the episode when they talked about like Henry and then this other patient that was also released. I'm blanking on the name. I know they call the character Deadline, but I can't remember the guy's secret identity. But do you have it there? I feel bad now because I can't remember his name.
His name is De Stefano or something.
Okay. All right. Couldn't remember. Anyway, Deadline is the character. In the comics, he can phase through objects, which they do use tech here. So in the chat, you can correct me if I'm wrong here on this one. I got the feeling that he was a combination of enhancements and technology. Is that what you were getting from that as well? I feel like he was slightly enhanced, like not necessarily as powerful as Superman, but slightly enhanced, but also using that phasing tech. That was the impression that I got, because he also had the technology that looked like the Kryptonian dagger that he was using. Do you think it was all tech or something? Because I feel like he was being enhanced somehow.
No, it was the way I took it is, like I said in my review, it is, I think he was injected with Superman's blood, and they're using the blood as the new XK because they did XK for 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I get it. I'm like, okay, Todd Helbing, this is what you did when you were over on Flash. You came up with different reasons for why people had powers. So right. They're using his blood, and I'm guessing Bruno can manipulate it to, give people whatever abilities. Henry Miller had super strength and flight and invulnerability. He has this intangibility, this phasing, and he's an expert in like hand-to-hand combat because the way he was shanking up Clark.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing we've always talked about with like Superman in general is even though Superman is a brawler, when you put him up against somebody who's almost as strong as him that can actually fight, he has problems. This is why Wonder Woman, even in the animated stuff, she's not like Superman level powerful at all times, but she's a fighter and she knows how to fight. So unless Superman gets in that one hit, if you can fight Superman. You just have to be able to fight. But the other thing is Superman, and we've seen this as well, holds back a lot.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember there's been a couple of animated ones where Superman's been like, I'm not holding back anymore. And then
Justice League, where he was fighting Darkseid.
Yeah. Like when he doesn't hold back, that's a whole different situation. But typically Superman doesn't fight all out.
He pulls his punches a lot. Yeah.
Right. So he's fighting Deadline. I thought it was a cool character. I don't know if we'll see them again, but I thought it was neat. Like this intangible assassin, which I thought was kind of cool.
How did Clark figure out how to get him? Like, it's like Clark was figuring out how to fight him in the moment, because when he got him like stuck in the wall, I'm like, how did you time it that perfectly?
I don't know. I have no clue. But I will say this. How did he fly in and see the device doing that transmitting and just not use his heat vision?
That's the one part I hated. I'm like, even my wife said, So you're just gonna leave that going? Like,
It would be better to destroy that entire thing than to let that information get out.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was like I was like,
You did it with the blood. You
yeah,
just
I
you
I
just
had a
used your
little
heat
issue
vision
with
on the
that.
door.
I
Just
thought,
light them up
okay,
again.
unless there was something that we were unaware of that was either a cutscene or a line of dialogue that was missing, it didn't make a lot of sense for me for him to go in and not go, hey, maybe I should cut power to that or something along those lines. Now, a lot of people said that he was kind of shocked that there was somebody with powers. Like that maybe that distracted him, that he was facing somebody, because we know that according to the general, metahumans don't really exist on this earth.
Yeah, and all the XK is accounted for. So
Right. So seeing somebody else with powers may have distracted him, but we're not sure. Either way, that was a misstep for me. That was a problem where I was like, okay,
yeah,
there's an issue here. But the fight scene was good. It was a good fight scene. Regardless of that issue, I think the fight scene was really solid.
I loved how he just didn't like this Clark's invulnerability to kryptonite in general. I love how they're adapting like the whole thing from the comics as to where he's been exposed to kryptonite for so long that he builds up an invulnerability to it. Because if this were like the Superman on Supergirl or even Supergirl herself, them few cuts would have been laid out on the floor.
Yeah.
So like he kept going, and then when the suit healed up and he like just looked up at dude and like, okay, I know how to deal with you now. I loved that. And in that little short fight scene, I'm like, we need more of this. Just give us a whole episode of this.
I also want to say that it's fun to me that it's going to take a lot of kryptonite to take out Superman.
Yeah.
Like it's going to take a lot because he's used to like dealing, like you said, with that small amount. So the fact that he just kind of like was like, is that a dagger really? And then just didn't even, because early on that one dagger would have been enough to like slow down Superman, but that's not happening. So I do like the way they're handling that. But then all of that happens and the files are stolen. We'll get to that because that's the big cliffhanger at the end. But we get back to Smallville where the dance is going on and we have Lois and Clark, and Lois is again determined to go to this dance. And Clark is like, no, you can't do it. And when he comes back from defeating Deadline, she's like, you're right. I can't. I don't have the energy to go do this. And I should listen to you more. Finally, my boy gets a little respect put on his name because he gets a win. Has been the punching bag for everybody. Like when this general talked to him in this episode and he was like, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm like, yo, they're putting so much pressure on him to like who contains Lois Lane? Nobody does that. You're not going to hold her back. No. So the fact that he was yelling at him, it's almost like her dad knew that he couldn't do it. Because look, the thing was when she walked out, his tone changed. Her dad's tone changed. Whatever's going to make you better, whatever's going to make you happy or whatever. I'm like, wait a minute. You were barking all of that stuff at Clark. And then she walks out and you immediately completely switch it up and act like it's okay. It's just like, all right, I get it.
It takes a lot of balls to just openly yell at Superman.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Clark, like you don't scare this man at all.
I also think that goes a lot with the relationship that they have now versus what it was when we first met them in season 1. They've just become a lot closer as a family, which I think is important. Yeah. But then we get that sweet moment at the house where all the kids are there with the family and, Jordan gets a chance to dance with his mom. And then we have Jonathan with Candace. And this is where I want to talk about the whole like the thing with like them breaking away from Smallville. So we see that Lana is not continuing this storyline with the mayor. Like they're going to name the town hall after the mayor. That story I think is effectively dead. I think we're done with that story. We've had the Junior moment with Sarah. We had that with Lana. And it seems like the city of Smallville or the little town of Smallville is becoming an afterthought. And the other reason why is because Candace is moving away, which means that now Jonathan will not have a love interest in Smallville. And we know that he may be working for the fire department, but I think that might just be a storyline for this season. I don't think that's gonna carry over because the main ties to Smallville are slowly fading away.
Yep.
So I think this is like at the end of this season, I would not be shocked if not necessarily the big finale, but I would not be shocked if we see them packing up and moving back to Metropolis at the end of the season. I think that's what's going to happen.
Me either.
That's
And
what I feel.
and
like.
if you didn't, I peeped this from like the first episode. First season and the second season, the big threats were literally threatening Smallville.
Mhm.
The threat isn't in Smallville anymore.
I think Lex is going to be the reason why they move back to Metropolis.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I could be wrong. I just have a feeling about it because the Bruno storyline is still going strong and we're at like the halfway point of the season. So, or close to the halfway point. Not exactly, close to it. A couple more episodes. But I truly believe that. So the big cliffhanger that we have at the end of the episode is that the stuff Deadline was stealing was locations of op sites and storage sites for the government. And guess what they were storing and we didn't know about it? Bizarro's corpse.
And this is why Clark always has a problem with the DOD and Sam's getting the brunt of it because Sam, you took over after all of that. So you knew about the blood. That's one thing. You also knew about Bizarro's body
And you
neglected to tell him. This is why he has a problem with y'all.
Now, I want to say this. We all know when Superman dies, he doesn't always just die.
Yeah.
And Bizarro isn't like the dumb crystallized Bizarro. This is just another Superman with bad skin. That's pretty much what it is.
And doesn't have a problem killing people.
Right. This is a Clark that, and by the way, also is if he comes back and has memories, he's going to be really angry that he's stuck over here because we don't know how he would ever get back to his world.
Yep.
So they were storing a corpse, a technically Superman,
on a black site.
And a site that was listed like this is okay. So I'm just going to put this out there. If I was somebody being super shady and sketchy like the government, I would not literally put the location of Superman's body anywhere on any files. That would be something that you would have to go digging through paperwork in some file folder in the back of a warehouse in the middle of nowhere to find out where he is. Because that is probably one of the most dangerous things you could have stored. And now Bruno Mannheim has it. So we know through set photos that there's going to be some sort of creature that ends up fighting Superman at the end of the season or close to the end of the season. And we've suspected that it's going to be a Doomsday clone, which it could be. Staggervore here has a super chat. What do you think Bruno has planned for Bizarro's body? So that's what we're going to talk about here for a second. Possibly there's a whole Doomsday scenario where they could just go the route of actually making Bizarro Doomsday, which is who we thought it was from the beginning, right? However, there is another character that has been mentioned that would be a little bit on the nose, I think, for this season. And that's a character called Cancer with a K. Right? Now, this is a Superman villain. I saw this mentioned a few weeks ago by different people. But initially, this character looks like this. And it's got spikes on its back, which would lead me to believe that's what they were showing in the scenes that were from set photos that Canada Graphs talked about. Now, here's the deal. Cancer has a few iterations, but Cancer is a vaguely humanoid green mass encrusted with calcified or crystalline growths, which would explain what that is on the back in the set photos. The creature's origins are linked to Avruskin of Polyastin. The second General Zod infected Superman with a form of cancer via the use of kryptonite. Now, they may not do that. That may not be a thing. But look, basically, this is a clone of like a Kryptonian. Like all the powers are basically Superman powers. The only thing that he has that's a little bit different is a necrotic touch that can devour organisms. But everything else is pretty much Superman powers, right? So this would mean if they have a Superman body and they're experimenting with our Superman's blood, could they end up creating something like this. Now, they may not call it Cancer with a K because I feel like that's too on the nose.
Yeah.
But this could be the character that they're referencing for the show. Now that you've been provided this information, what are you thinking? You think it's Doomsday, or do you feel like this might be more like what we're going to see at the end?
I think it could go in this direction.
Okay.
Knowing Todd Helbing, if he knows the information came out about the what was seen on set, he could play with this a little bit, and it could be this the entire time. He could let people go on thinking it was Doomsday, and we get another switcheroo. I think this would be cool to see, just a more humanoid version.
Mhm.
I don't.
I think that if they do this, it's just going to be a green version of Superman with crystals on it. I think that's probably what it's going to be, because honestly, I don't like this design. I don't like the design of the character. It looks a little too weird for me. I wouldn't be shocked, but I think from a budgetary standpoint, I think just making a green Superman with crystals would be probably the most likely scenario. But thank you for your super chat, Staggervore. All right, before we move on to Gotham Knights and Titans, we had an interview with Alex Garfin, which I think is quite interesting. But there is one part of the interview that I want to talk about. Now, this is over on Krypton site, and Superman Lois interview. Alex Garfin powers head on into season 3. There's a question here. It's a pretty long interview, but there's one question here about season 4. I thought we'd talk about this before we move on to the next show. How hopeful are you for season 4 news? And this is Alex's response. Hopeful. I'm hoping. It's so rare, first of all, that you even get to work on a TV show. Then it's even more rare that something so good at such an incredible and loyal and kind fan base. You know, fans are not always that kind. We know. And then even more rare when the entire set and the crew and the producers are all awesome who value kindness. It's a completely unique experience, just how good it is. Even if I got on another show, I'm sure that it will be as great as well. But man, I know a part of me will always miss this show. So he's not, because we had a comment from Tyler that kind of confused people a couple of weeks ago, where he said that he's curious to see what they're going to do Superman in the future. And then we have this comment from Alex that sounds like they still don't know anything. Now, we know on the 25th of this month, we're supposed to get some big news about the future of the CW. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to announce renewals. They might not. But it's coming around that time of year where we would typically hear if a show is going to get renewed or not. You know what I mean?
One year anniversary of the death of the Arrowverse as we know it.
Yeah. So the thing is that unless he's just playing stupid, like sometimes they do when they do these interviews, it tells me that they're still not aware of it, which makes me wonder if we're going to get that renewal announcement now, because that's when the show comes back. So I can only imagine we're sitting around on Tuesday, the 25th, waiting for this news, the re-premiere of the mid-season premiere of Superman and Lois, basically, to find out that the show has been canceled. That would be worst case scenario.
That would be very depressing.
Also, if they talk about Gotham Knights going away, that will kill the ratings. That show will immediately drop off whatever ratings it's getting. I'm hoping for good news on the 25th, but I'm being realistic. We may not hear great news there. All right, in the chat, what are your ratings 1 to 10 on Superman and Lois this week? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? What did you think of the reveal of Bizarro at the end? I'm curious what people think about that. I believe I gave this episode like an 8.5 out of 10.
I did too.
Because I feel like it's not the best episode, obviously, but there was a few issues with it, like the stuff with Superman not destroying the device. Some of the stuff with the side story I didn't really care for too much, like the Hallmark moment with Superman talking to the ladies in the hospital. But yeah, I'm just curious what people think. We're getting a few scores here. Let's jump in here. We got a 9 from Kenneth, 7 from Staggervore, 9 from Albert, 8 from Kata, 7 from Silhouetted Animator. Feather Guardian gives it a 10 out of 10. Okay. James Gunn, 9 out of 10 because of the Bizarro reveal. Dan giving it an 8. Laura giving it a 9. Miko Net giving it an 8. Dark Bat giving it a 9. And Darth Bunyan giving it a 9.5 to 10 out of 10. Wow. He's really enjoying Superman and Lois this season. All right, let's move over. We're going to do this won't be like a full episode thing, but we're going to talk about Gotham Knights because Lance is also watching the show. And usually if somebody is a guest on the after party and they watch the show, we take some time to talk about it. So this week's Gotham Knights was titled More Money, More Problems. Shout out to Notorious B.I.G. with Mo Money, Mo Problems, one of my favorite songs from that era. So we had two stories-ish happening this week. We had the stuff with the kids like facing off against the Killians. I think was it Killian? I think it was the Killian. It was like a weird like name for the McKillians. I think it was because it was Dylan McKillian. I think it was Dylan McKillens. McKillens. That's it. Yep. McKillens. I was like, wait a minute, that has to be a comic book tie-in because there's no way they use that name on the show. I didn't even bother to look, but I thought it was hilarious. But anyway, they need to go to this warehouse to get these files out of the safe. That's pretty much the storyline for them, and they have to set all of that up, which I thought was fine. That was a fine setup. And then we had the stuff with Harvey where he's dealing with memory loss and time loss and waking up places that he doesn't remember and things like that, which I thought was the more successful part of the episode.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the kid situation. So they have to go on a Sunday to this like warehouse, and they go in through the door to get to all of this, right? And then they act like there's no other doors in the warehouse. But then you see scenes where there's doors behind them leading out back. So I'm like, what's happening here?
My whole thing was, why are you doing this in broad daylight? And you're
not only that, but they had phones.
Yeah.
They could have figured out a distraction with the phone somehow, calling a fire in or something to make the fire department come. Like there was a lot of things that could have been done, or I don't know, reaching out to Harvey Dent with your phone and saying, hey, we're trapped by these people and we have proof that we didn't do something. Can you help us out? Like, it just felt like there was this tension. And I'm like, why is there tension? Because you have a bunch of them and there's other exits out. There's windows they could have gone out of. There's a lot of different ways they could have gotten out of there. By the way, they could have just gotten in one of those vans and drove through the door and ran over all the people standing at the door because they were right there. Exactly. All the people were right there at the door. So it was just so many things where I'm like, you could have gotten out of that. And it just went on for so long. It got to be ridiculous for me.
Yeah.
So that was the weakest part of the episode for me. That was the weakest part.
I didn't care for that story at all. And that was the main. That's sad.
I mean, and yes, it's Silhouette, you say no killing. There's other ways they could have gotten out of there without like doing that. There's other ways. I'm saying there were options. There were options for them to leave the warehouse because you don't have a warehouse that only has one exit.
Yeah, that's weird.
That just doesn't make any sense at all. And it was a tiny door. They had this big warehouse and that was like a little truck door. I'm like, what's going on here? Anyway, very weak part of the story. Also the fact that was it Harper dated the guy, which I thought that was another one where I'm like, it got to go into like Riverdale territory for me with that.
The whole explanation of why she dated him to get and did the job to get the money for Cullen's. I said, are we really stopping the plot for a sibling squabble?
Okay.
Or this explanation. I'm like, I love the sibling dynamic, but that just felt out of place. Like you guys are literally on a time crunch, but you want to go to the side and yell at your sister.
That's one of the things that's like a mortal sin for me when it comes to these shows. And that is conversations, wrong place, wrong time. Okay. You're trapped in this warehouse. Your entire focus should be trying to get out of this warehouse. All of them were having individual conversations about things that had nothing to do. Like when Carrie was upset that her mother was looking for her when she could potentially be killed.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, this is a trope that happens with the shows that I'm not a big fan of. And when they started doing this, we're about to get a cat visit. When they start to do this, I go into like, oh, this is Riverdale. basically. It's like, and I say that no offense to Riverdale, but that it feels like a 2016,
Yeah.
2017 CW show at that point. But then you juxtaposition that with the stuff with Harvey and Rebecca and that whole storyline. That was fantastic. I thought that was great. Like him, like the way they set up the music, sort of working through the phone to like put him in a trance. Him talking about it being related to his family and his father, and that whole storyline, just absolutely good to me. I can't wait to see where it goes. We get to see he's with Rebecca. Apparently, they have a relationship with his other personality, which is like a little weird too, I guess.
And she hasn't put 2 and 2 together yet. Like,
yeah,
Harvey doesn't remember any of this stuff, but you aren't concerned at all.
Right. So it's a little weird.
Okay.
It's right. It's a little weird. And I'm very so here's the deal. I'm very curious about this storyline. I think the storyline with the kids this week was filler. I feel like the kids storyline
episode 2 or 3, wherever the party was, I felt like that was like a filler episode.
Yeah. So here's my thing with Gotham Knights, and I still stand by this. I think Gotham Knights is a solid show. It's a fine show. I think though we are what, 5 episodes in now?
Yep.
We need to up the quality a little bit. And this is where I start to get real nitpicky with shows. When a new show comes out, I usually give them a grace period. I'm like, all right, if you're good enough for me to give you like 4 episodes. By the way, I still think this is better than Naomi. I think it's a much better show than Naomi. But around this time is where I start to hold them to a little bit higher standard. I'm like, all right, so the growing pains should have been taken care of. At this point, when you're writing the show, you're 5-6 episodes in, you should be working on really solidifying and putting that foundation down on what the show is going to be. So that's what I'm hoping for. I think the show is solid. However, I think it's a 1-season show.
I do too. And honestly, if this episode was as good as, because if we're being completely honest, episode 4 was a 10 out of 10. It was better than every episode thus far.
Yeah.
If every episode could have been like that, could have had that tension to like what kept you on the edge of your seat. The only thing this episode kept from that was the Harvey Dent stuff.
Right.
I'm like, why can't every episode be like episode 4? Like you literally, you handed us gold, then the next week you swatted it away. Like,
yeah. All right. So we have a couple of comments here. Anthony Beltry, a Team Eric member for 31 months. Thank you so much. Gotham Knights will definitely be done. I feel like it will too. Even though it's performing very well on streaming, I think as far as the CW is concerned, Gotham Knights is done. Now, whether or not Max decides to pick up the show and move it to the streaming service, that they could do that.
Max.
I know. Whether they decide to do that or not is entirely up to them. But I do feel like as far as the CW is concerned, I think the show is a 1-season show. I don't feel like
miniseries.
Yeah, I that's the way I feel. So James Gunn here. Thank you for dropping in, James. I don't know if I like that Harvey did his Two-Face because of mental illness. Do you feel the same? Well, I think what's going to happen is I think that they are going to somehow, because we know that he wears the makeup at some point. So I think at some point the two personalities are going to merge together. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't think they're going to leave it as like this, like when he's one personality, he does evil things and the other one doesn't. I think they're going to merge the personalities together and they're going to make sense of it. But as of right now, you're right. It's a little weird that they're doing it in a way that makes it look like it could be a mental illness. But the psychiatrist seems to think that's not the case. Maybe we'll find out that it's not. Maybe it's something completely unrelated to that. And he's just remembering the kind of trauma that he had in the past. That's a possibility.
The psychiatrist is in on it because I think
so too.
I felt like she was like enabling him and basically like, no, that's not what's happening. I think you're fine.
It's like gaslighting him. You think
swatting his feelings aside.
Darth Bunyan says, what is your opinion of March if he's an OWL member or is the coin a misdirect? So I've had people say this in the video. I've seen comments on videos about this. I think there's a high probability that Rebecca, his wife, is a member of Court of Owls and maybe he isn't.
I think Harvey's the one that planted that left that coin for him.
You mean the other personality of Harvey?
The other personality, because when he went to evidence lockup to look for it, he seen that he had already the other personality had signed it out. And when they did that, that's why episode 4 is like the top tier. Because I'm like, oh my God, your other person, that leads right into the whole affair thing. The other personality wants Rebecca for herself. So, of course, you're going to... What if the other personality is working for the Court of Owls?
Right.
And that's why Harvey is untouchable.
I actually think that... I still think that Lincoln could end up being Owlman before the end of the season. I think that's a possibility. Maybe not in a full-on costume, but definitely taking up like a path to that personality. So that's pretty much it. That's my thoughts on Gotham Knights this week. I think this week was one of the weaker episodes, but I think that the Harvey Dent stuff was quite interesting, if I'm being completely honest. So in the chat, let us know what your score for this week's Gotham Knights is. I didn't do a review this week because, as I said before, Gotham Knights doesn't get a lot of traction on my channel as an individual review. So I will continue to talk about it here, and I will even score it here probably for the remainder of the season, unless we have a huge episode where something big happens. I would probably give this week's episode like a 6 out of 10. And I don't think, for me, I'm giving that 6 completely based on the Harvey Dent storyline.
Same.
So I feel like it's a 6 out of 10.
And I'm like you. I contemplated on doing a review, but it's like I couldn't motivate myself to if I did a review, it would have been like a 4-minute review like last week's Flash episode.
Yeah.
And it would have just been about the Harvey stuff. So
yeah. So 6 exactly for the Harvey stuff. Yeah, I agree. We're seeing some 5s, we're seeing some 7s, 5. I would say if you give it a 5, I totally understand. I totally understand. But the one thing that kind of makes me sad, and I know, and I'm curious what the chat thinks about this before we talk about Titans, is I wonder, like, was it worth giving up Batwoman for Gotham Knights? You don't think so?
Never in a million years.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on now. We're going to talk about Titans. It was a 2-episode premiere. We're not going to dive into too many details, but I just want to get some general thoughts on it, because it is a lot to talk about and we are on limited time. So this week we had the return of season 4 of Titans in 2 episodes, back-to-back, 7 and 8, which is Call's Folly. And the second episode, I believe, was titled Dick and Carol and Ted and Corey. So those were the 2 episodes. And even though they were 2 separate episodes, it was like one long episode. And the premise is that they are out trying to figure out this mystery, and they get stuck in a town in another dimension, basically completely blocked off from the rest of the world, which leaves some of the team members out. We have the stuff going on with Superboy, which is we can talk about that very quickly when we get to the end, because that's kind of the cliffhanger for everything that's happening. Then we have Robin and Bernard. I think those were the 2 that were left out of the city that were doing the work together. Beast Boy is missing because we know that he's in a separate episode coming up next week, which got moved from 7 to 9. Makes sense now because these 2 episodes really felt like one long episode. But anyway, basically, Nightwing, Corey, and Raven all get trapped inside of this weird dimensional bubble created by the followers of Trigon that's hiding a horn. And the horn is what they need because they believe that is a way to stop what is happening. And they think Raven is the key to that. And the town is, I'm going to run through this very quickly. We're just going to get through all this because we can just, once I explain all of it, we'll talk about our thoughts on it. The town is being controlled by sound. There's music playing, and the music playing is causing them to forget who they are. So they will just acclimate to this new belief of Trigon and listen to mother and brother, and pretty much the sheriff is the person running the show. And 2 of the people there one of them is deaf by accident, the other is deaf by their own hands because they know the music is controlling what people are doing. They help out the team. Can we talk about how Nightwing was beat up so easily by those 3 cops at the beginning, like in the first episode? Like when he went into the sheriff's office, they basically were able to beat him with a taser.
I think it was because of the maybe she put some in his coffee too,
I'm guessing that.
because she did think he was blood. So
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, he got beat pretty easily. So I'm hoping you're right. They didn't make that too super clear.
yeah,
But the first episode really is a setup for all of that situation, and then obviously Raven stays in the coffee shop, but she goes missing as well. And so we have all that happening. And then on the outside, we have Robin and Bernard with like a love story / like situation going on. I'll be honest with you. You know that I love when people are represented in media and everything. I don't think there's any chemistry between the two of them.
it's not. It's not at all.
I don't know what it is, or if it's just like, because I'm watching it with people who come from all walks of life, and they're like, I'm not feeling anything from this at all.
It's because, and me and my wife had this entire discussion. It's because, and this is the exact thing I don't want them to do to John. It's because they never explicitly said what Tim's, orientation was. They never showed him showing interest in people. And yes, that can be because, they never did it, so that doesn't mean that he can't be, bisexual or gay. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, that's fair. I get that. But at the same time, it feels forced. Especially since, one, we just met Bernard. You kissed in a time of distress. And now you guys are just together, but Tim's ignoring his texts and calls and whatnot. I'm like, the whole thing feels forced.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if I would see it that way, but I definitely feel like there's something missing. And I don't know what it is, because let's be honest, no offense to either one of them, they are the lowest ring of characters. Like they're at the bottom of the character. Like if we're talking about like order of like hierarchy in the show, they're at the very bottom. So there's not a lot of time to work with these characters. So when you're telling a story like this, you have to speed it along. And the thing was, I thought that they were making progress, and I wouldn't complain about it if this hadn't happened, because I thought, okay, maybe it's going to get better. But when they're in the tower, the radio tower, and they have the argument about like a feeling or not a feeling or whatever, and he goes to leave, he's like, well, how am I supposed to get back? Well, just get a Sundog Uber. I'm like, that would have been it for me. That would have been it for me. There would be no you coming back and talking to me like they did without an apology. Yeah. Because you were just going to leave me out here? No. And then Bernard comes back in and it's like, well, I got my car and there's electricity. No apology. No nothing after you just did that. And it was very like, even if there's no chemistry, if they're trying to make it work, hats off to them for making it work. I need an apology. You're not going to leave me in the middle of nowhere because you decide you want to go back to the hotel room and then not apologize for it.
Yeah.
No, that's not happening.
Then so the whole hotel room thing was cringy.
Okay. My issue with that was it went on for so long. We were sitting there watching and I'm like, why is this scene going on for so long? Like, I don't understand. Like,
the dresser push-ups, him sponging his hair that did nothing.
And have we established how old he is? Did we figure it out? Is he an adult in the show or not?
Tim was I thought he was a high schooler last season.
But he could have been 17 and a senior. We don't know. Like, I don't know. It's a very weird story that I feel like they need to work really hard on, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're not working hard on it. They're doing things that feel like they should work, but they're not working. And I just feel like if you're going to tell the story, you need people that have chemistry, and you need to make the moments matter, especially when you have very little time. And that whole like locking the door, unlocking the door thing, I know they were going for like an artsy situation. I just don't think it was right in the episode. I think, I mean, if you're going to do it, just do it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Maybe it'll get better. We'll have to wait and see between the two of them. I just don't know. It's just, and everybody's talking about Bernard's acting. I don't know much about the actor, but you're right. He's not nailing it for me. Maybe that's the issue. There's an uncomfortable connection between the two of them that I can't put my finger on. Is that a good way to put it? Like there's something uncomfortable between the two of them that I'm not really sure what is happening. Anyway, we're spending way too much time on it. Let's move on. They end up like figuring out there's some sort of issue with the town, but they can't do much about it. Inside the town, they're running around. This music is playing. I kept saying, take a gun and shoot the speakers down.
Yeah, that was too.
There's a speaker outside of your house. Just knock it down with a rock or something. Like we made it. It was very clear that they had to have speakers. This wasn't like totally magical. So I'm like, just knock the speaker down. Like, why are you not like, what's going on? I don't know. It was a little annoying to me there. I did like the idea that this thing was slowly taking over their minds and that, you know, Nightwing wanted to use this method that Bruce came up with to like talk yourself out of a brainwashing. Yeah. All of that was fine. It all worked for me. Raven getting hurt actually hurts Brother Blood. I thought that was a cool twist. He didn't have much development in this episode. He was in it, but he just didn't really do a lot. And him and Mother, there's a crack between the two of them because she's obviously trying to tell him what to do and he's not feeling that at all. So that's going on. We have the townsfolk who are all like, burn the heretic. Like they're very much like, you know, they're lost in the sauce or whatever. But then they find out, hey, let's go find the radio tower and we will figure that out. Then they had this weird person like tied up in the radio tower named Vinny. Was there any relevance to this person? Did I miss who that was?
No, honestly thought it was an old woman at first.
Yeah. So Darth Bunyan goes, what the hell was that person in the radio station as a Team Eric member for 18 months? Thank you so much, Darth Bunyan. I don't know who that was. It said Vinny in the subtitles because we always have subtitles on so I can see the names of characters. And it said Vinny. I don't know who that's supposed to be. And I tried to look it up online to see if I could figure it out. I couldn't. So I'm guessing that might've been the radio DJ or whatever. Either way, they were connected to this station where Brother Blood's blood or Trigon's blood or whatever was using it to control the townspeople. They blow that up. The whole dimensional wall comes down and everyone, I'm assuming, because we didn't get a follow-up on it, I'm assuming everyone reverted back to normal.
Yeah, I guess.
This is one of those situations where they didn't make it clear because they made it seem like once people are changed, they're changed for good. But then Corey says, well, I did that whole brainwashing thing that you showed me and that's how I came out of it. But then what about the other people in the town? Are they just brainwashed minions of Trigon now?
The one lady in the blue dress at church that just kill the heretic. That was hilarious.
It was actually.
She was all for it.
It was very, very good. I will say the fight scene between Nightwing and all of the police officers was really good in the second episode inside the church. But I was like, man, you destroy the pews. The Bibles are going everywhere. Like, what's going on here? But it was a very good, well choreographed fight scene. I actually enjoyed it. And then we had the stuff with Superboy where how are you vibing on this like Lex Luthor Superboy story for Connor? How do you feel about it?
I feel like
we didn't have much, but
it feels like a child just trying to find himself to me. Mm-hmm. It's weird, like at the beginning of the episode where he's trying to act all like dark and brooding and tough, and then he just like walks away, and they're like, "Where's Connor?" I'm like, why is he acting like an ass to them? Like, yeah, they did nothing to him. Like it feels like an immature child. Yeah. Rightfully so. He's only like 3, but
yeah. So I'm going to highlight your comment, Thomas. We'll answer that in just a moment. But then he finds out, he goes and does a little digging and finds this, I guess it's was it the scientist that was working on him back in season 2? Is that who it was? Yep. Yeah.
The one that did that thing of Beast Boy and made him kill people.
So she's like, oh, you can use this information and you can stop them yourself or whatever. And then the big cliffhanger is that he's talking to Brother Blood and seems like he's toasting with him.
Yeah.
I'll say this. It's a very dangerous situation when you have somebody with Superman's powers who has access to Lex Luthor's like technology and science and whatever magic stuff he's looked up. So we're looking at a potential like really dangerous Superboy. Because if he finds a way to fight them and magic doesn't affect him the same way it affects Superman normally, they're in for some bad times.
Yep.
So that's a little concerning as well. I also want to say Beast Boy being gone, they didn't really seem concerned about it at all.
Yeah, it felt weird. Like they didn't try to search for Gar at all. So I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah. So I enjoyed the episodes back. I think they were pretty strong episodes, except for a couple small things. So I'm going to combine the score for both of them because they were kind of just one long episode. So for me, the two of them together would fall somewhere around like an 8 out of 10, I think.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed them. I thought it was a strong return. There was a couple of little logical errors that I had with it, but overall, it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the two episodes. And I'm looking forward. Remember, next week is the Stargirl episode. So we don't know what the context of that is, how long she's going to be in the episode, but it is going to be the Beast Boy and Stargirl episode. So we'll have to wait and see, like, what that's going to look like for Titans right now. And I'm wondering what everybody else's score of Titans is at the moment. All right. I know Lance has to go very soon, but I do want to take a moment here to answer a question and talk briefly about the Flash before you have to go. I know you got like 5 or 6 minutes before you have to head out.
Yep.
Look, that's another thing. Jinx is gone.
Yeah, I did not like that. I did not like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, you guys pumped her up like she was going to be in the entire
She even had a suit. She even had a suit.
A brand new suit, and then she's just gone. And I liked her.
My hope is that she's somehow stuck with Gar.
Possibly.
That's my hope. We'll have to see. All right. It looks like everybody pretty much enjoyed the return to Titans, so that's pretty good. Yeah, they did. That's right. I forgot about that. Hold on. Yeah, her soul's gone to heaven, so she's 100% gone. So right, she is gone. I guess she's not going to be with Gar. All right. R.I.P. Jinx, who spent like literally 5 seconds in her costume.
Since when can Raven send people to heaven? But
I don't know. All right, let's talk briefly about the Flash. But before we do that, I want to answer Thomas Scott's chat here. Do we know which episode Matt Lesher is going to return in? He, Stephen Amell, and Teddy Sears are only thing I'm looking for. I think the penultimate and the finale.
No,
I think
Matt
those
Lesher
are the two.
Matt Lesher is in episode 10, I believe.
Oh, that's right. That's right, because we have the Stephen Amell episode, which is 9, then 10, 11. Okay, so yeah, and I think we believe that the Matt Lesher episode is going to be a backstory for Reverse Flash. I think a lot of people are pretty sure that's what it's going to be, or some sort of a backstory for Reverse Flash. So we'll see. There we go. All right. So before you head out, the Flash has been kind of a bummer this season. How does this make you feel going into the 26th when it comes back, knowing that it is the big like Green Arrow episode? Are you, because again, you haven't been on here, so we haven't had a chance to really talk much about it. I believe this is the worst first 8 episodes we've ever had in any Arrowverse show, in my opinion, in any season.
Yep. I cannot disagree with you there. It's a bit disappointing because like this was the year like me making content. Like I was excited to cover this season, but up until now, it's felt like a chore to do every week because I don't have anything really, like nothing good to say about it. The only good thing I had to say was, well, I love Javicia. That was it. So like it's no reason why in the final season, the last review I did was a good 4 minutes, and it was just I liked seeing Barry and Iris on screen together. Candace and Grant's, chemistry was great, but it was a nothing episode, and that's the gist of the entire review. I could have did a short. Like it feels like
my review was like 3 minutes. I think I did like a 3 or 4 minute review of it because I
didn't
just
even
have
edit it.
No,
it's been a big waste. And like with the whole bringing the multiverse back thing in the next episode, if you were going to do that now, why didn't you do that then and make Red Death seem more interesting?
They messed with our girl Javicia. We both love Javicia. They messed her up in the Red Death story arc by not bringing back the multiverse because it didn't make any sense.
There's so many drop plot holes. The show, it looks beautiful, but what good is a new aspect ratio and new cameras and whatnot if the writing, it feels like a big filler episode. Like the first half was a big filler episode. And I know Paige talked about it in a video that, the budget was, cut down for the, to reserve it for the back half. So if the back half, there's my alarm. If the back half if the back half is not amazing, it was a waste. And
Yeah.
this will go down in history as the worst season of the Flash, but worst final season ever in the Arrowverse. And
Yeah.
that's going against Supergirl.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you have to go, but I just want to say one of my biggest issues is that we have side characters. We talked about this with Superman and Lois at the very beginning of the stream. We have side characters like Allegra and Chester who have never truly been fully fleshed out. They've never been given proper stuff. Chester's best episode was the one where he got to go see his dad. Other than that, they haven't given him anything. And Allegra's episodes have not been good at all. We haven't really learned anything about Allegra. Matter of fact, the episode where Allegra was with her cousin got more storyline in that episode than she did. Esperanza. So when you had these interlude episodes, why did you decide to not give us a Chester episode where he is the main character and we get a storyline with that stolen information of his where he has to deal with that, and Allegra and him are working together to do that? Why could that not have been an interlude episode?
There was no time.
I guess. With Barry and Iris, why couldn't we have had a fun adventure with the two of them where she's investigating something and Barry has to use his actual investigation skills instead of his Flash skills, instead of being stuck? That is the cheapest of the cheapest of the cheap. They filmed an entire episode pretty much in one room.
Yep.
One room.
And don't get me started on how dumb that premise was. You mean to tell me they can hear the whooshing noise from Barry running, but they're just sitting there? What's that?
Yeah.
Nobody's
a whole
gonna
episode
look up.
in one room. So it feels to me like we had three, like, to be completely honest, like I will never go back and purposely watch these 8 episodes. I will when I do my series thoughts, I will go back and watch all of the shows, all of the episodes of every season, so I can give a proper thought out, concept of what I'm thinking when it comes to the series. But for personal like enjoyment, I will never go back and watch these 8 episodes ever again. And even if I were to say, oh, well, I'm going to go back and watch the graphic novels, I would watch Red Death, because if I'm watching the graphic novels, I'm doing that. But these interludes would be like they serve no purpose whatsoever. No purpose.
None at all.
So that's my thoughts on that. All right, before Lance heads out, next Saturday we'll be doing a special after party. We'll be talking about Titans, but I'm going to bring on some special guests. We have a couple people I'm trying to confirm now to come in and talk, but we're all going to be back talking about the state of DC TV after the Arrowverse. We're going to be talking about Penguin. We're going to talk about some of the animated shows, things that are going to be coming out, and what it looks like for us as the fans moving forward with DC, with James Gunn running the show and a lot of these shows not coming back. And we'll also talk about our thoughts moving forward on the 25th. What do we think we're going to see? What's going to happen? It's going to be one of those shows. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you see us next Saturday. It'll start at normal time, which is 6:30. Won't start early. We'll start at 6:30 on time. And I want to thank Lance for joining me. Thank you for being here today on the after party. I know there was no Flash this week, but we did have some pretty interesting stuff to talk about. But he'll be here next week as well. And if you want to check Lance out, your streams are Mondays at 6:30, I think. Is that right? 6:30.
Yes. Yep, 6:30 New York time.
So yeah, no Twitch after this, but I will be going live on Twitch tonight, just not right after this. It's still too early to go live on Twitch. So I'll be going on Twitch live later on. So make sure you follow me on twitch.tv/airricksreloaded. And you can follow Lance on all social media. Just find it, Lance Ringgold on all social media.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging out, and we will see everyone later. Have a great night. Bye.